Okay, so I want to start off with a confession. That's what we do around here, right? It's new for me. But before I share that confession with you, let's play a game. 3 boxes. Each box contains something valuable from ancient Jerusalem. Which box contains the most valuable item? Well, hold on. Who says the little one? Put your hands up. Who says the middle one? And who says the big one? Okay. So, at the very end, we will open up these boxes and find out which one is the correct answer. Now, my confession is 2 parts. First, in a few months, I am going to be turning 40 years old. Well, the more important part is that up until a few years ago, when I began working in the city of David, in, I guess, nearly 35 years, I had almost never had a meaningful interaction with a Christian. I grew up in a nice Jewish bubble in the okay state of New Jersey. Hasn't made the great state, and I don't think it ever will, but has good branding. It's the Garden State. I haven't really seen many gardens there, but... So I grew up in this nice Jewish bubble, went to Jewish day school my whole life, went to Yeshiva University for college, and I've been working in, so to speak, the Jewish Israel field since then. And until I came to the city of David, I had almost no interaction with Christians. And since I've come to the city of David, some of the most meaningful interactions that I have had in the last few years have been with Christians. And what has been the foundation of those relations? The Bible, and more specifically, Jerusalem. The shared bond that the Jewish people and Christians have for Jerusalem brings us together. With that background, it was a little bit ironic when over the last few years, the United Nations and a body called UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, they began passing a series of resolutions about the significance of Jerusalem. And they actually also understood that Jews and Christians actually have a lot in common when it comes to Jerusalem. Namely, nothing. And it was hard to understand how could it be that they're passing these resolutions saying that Jews and Christians have no connection to Jerusalem, when it would seem as clear as day to everyone in this room. Now, it would be great if we could just stand up and say, well, here's what it says in the Bible, and that would be enough. For better or for worse, we're living in a time, particularly with young people, when they say, I don't just want to believe. I also want to know. Is what's written in this book, is it true? Were the people real people? Were the events real events? Now, I'll share with you an ancient Jewish teaching, which says that before God brings a sickness into the world, he brings the cure. We are living, on the one hand, in a time of unprecedented sickness, where the nations of the world proudly get together at the United Nations and elsewhere, passing resolution after resolution, denying the heritage of Jerusalem. And yet at the same time, and I don't believe it's a coincidence, at the same time of this unprecedented sickness, we have unprecedented discovery. When the very ground is speaking, opening up and saying, here's the truth, for those who seek it, for those who want to see it. And that is what's happening every single day in the city of David. And that's what I want to share a little bit with you about today. that the United Nations, when they pass these resolutions, there's something fascinating. Because not only does it say the Temple Mount, the Western Wall are Islamic heritage sites, they condemn the archaeological excavations. Now you might wonder, why would the United Nations care about archaeology? Why would UNESCO, whose whole mandate is to preserve the cultural heritage of humanity, why would they be threatened by archaeological excavations? Why are they so scared? You would think that there aren't that many people in the world who get excited by archaeology, so why are they so threatened by it? And I think the answer for that is very simple, which is every single day in the archaeological excavations taking place throughout Israel, but most notably within the city of David, site of biblical Jerusalem, one of the most archaeologically excavated sites in the world, every single day, antiquities are being unearthed, which prove, not simply as a matter of faith, but as a matter of fact, the Jewish and Christian connection to Jerusalem. And as much as that excites the people in this room, it gives nightmares to others. It gives nightmares to the people of the United Nations. It gives nightmares to the Palestinians who have to contend with discoveries that say the emperor is naked. So what are some of those discoveries? So first, who here has been to the city of David? Nice. So very, very quickly, for the few of you who may not have been there, we have over here behind us a map of the Holy Basin, of ancient Jerusalem. We have in the center the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah, the Western Wall, the Old City of Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, and the city of David just outside the walls of the Old City. Up until 150 years ago, when people think, where is the original biblical city of Jerusalem? Everyone believes that it is within the walls of the Old City. Until the year 1867, when a man named Charles Warren will discover that, if we can get the clicker to work, here we go, discovers that the city of David is just outside the walls of the Old City. Now, it was a big deal because here's what it looked like at that time. And so scholar and layman alike say, Charles Warren, what are you talking about? You're telling us that this barren 11-acre ridge, this is the Jerusalem that has significance to billions of people around the world? There's nothing there. It has to be the Old City. Charles Warren says, I'm telling you, this is the spot. And over the next 150 years, the city of David will become one of the most archaeologically excavated sites in the world. And it becomes understood that the city of David is the original biblical city of Jerusalem. Now, in the work that I do for the city of David, I get to share ancient Jerusalem with people who were involved in shaping public opinion. And one time I had a journalist. And this journalist says to me, he says, Ze'ev, you know, these archaeologies that you're sharing with me, it's great, but you know these Israeli archaeologists, they're biased. You can't trust them. I mean, you guys want to find proof of the Bible for political reasons so you could do a land grab in Jerusalem, and therefore we can't trust you. We can't trust the Israeli archaeologists. And so I said to him, I said, okay, let's work with that assumption. And I said, have you ever heard of the Siloam inscription? And he said, no. I said, well, the Siloam inscription tells the story of a very significant event in the Bible. In the late 8th century, we're talking about 2,700 years ago, you have the biblical king Hezekiah. He is the king over the kingdom of Judah. There was also a kingdom of Israel, but at that point in time, the kingdom of Israel is gone, right? Exiled by the Assyrians. And Hezekiah, he understands that now that the Assyrians are gone, the kingdom of Israel is gone. He understands that who's next? Judah. And he says, we have a problem. And so he says that the Assyrians are going to come. And he says, in the Bible, why should they find much water? And so he begins a 4-year engineering project to divert the Gihon Spring, the ancient life source of Jerusalem, flowing today, going back thousands upon thousands of years mentioned in the Bible. And he diverts the flow of this spring to flow entirely within the walls of Jerusalem. And there's something amazing that happens, which is the Bible tells us a story that the teams, they actually meet. Now, is anyone here from Boston? East Coast, Boston, right? Boston, right? So there's a project called the Big Dig, right? Big Dig about 10 years ago, renovating all of downtown Boston. And you have all the latest engineering and GPS and radar technology, and they're engineering this underground tunnel for the highway, and they go like this. And they miss each other. What this inscription says for the younger people in the room is OMG, right? That stands for oh my God, in case anyone doesn't know, right? What does this inscription say? It dates back 2,700 years. It talks about the moment when the two teams of diggers, one on one side, one on the other side, they meet in the middle of a nearly 1,800-foot tunnel. The moment where it says they heard axe on axe. And when they break through, they embrace in the middle. Like, we did it, right? Can you believe it? We actually did it. And so I show this journalist what it says in the scriptures. I show the journalist the Siloam inscription, this picture. And I asked the journalist, I said, do you know where the Siloam inscription is today? He says, no. I say, well, it is actually in the Istanbul Archaeology Museum. Right? When the Ottomans were in Jerusalem, they took it home with them. I know, Pastor, you were very influential in helping to move the embassy. If you're looking for a new project, I know the Prime Minister would be very grateful if you could maybe help get this back. So I said to this journalist, I said, are our friends in Turkey involved in the Zionist conspiracy to prove the biblical connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem? Unlikely. So what happens next? So the Bible tells us that the Assyrians, they come to Jerusalem. And they besiege this city. And what happens next is an amazing story. The people within Jerusalem, they're panicked. The kingdom of Israel has long been exiled. And now the kingdom of Judah, Sennacherib, has gone city by city, conquering. All that's left is Jerusalem. Now I'm going to tell you how the story ends, which is it works out. Because if it didn't, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. Because had Jerusalem fallen 2,700 years ago, not only would there not be a Jewish people, not only would there not be an Israel, there also would not be all of you, Christians, right? 2,700 years ago, 700 years before Jesus, if Jerusalem falls, there is no Christians united for Israel because there are no Christians, there's no one to unite with, and there's no Israel. And now what happens? So the Bible says something amazing. Sennacherib comes, surrounds Jerusalem. And his chief of staff, his military officers are taunting the people in the city saying, surrender, give up. And King Hezekiah doesn't know what to do. The people are panicked. They want to surrender. And the prophet Isaiah, he says in one of the most powerful prophecies, he says to King Hezekiah, so saith the Lord, the king of Assyria shall not enter Jerusalem. Not a single arrow will fall within the walls of Jerusalem. By the way he came, so shall he return. And it says that Hezekiah goes to bed, wakes up in the morning, and the 185,000 strong army, by the time they wake up, is gone. Now, everyone in this room believes that story. But I'm sure there are many outside of this room who you would tell that story to, and they might say, okay, that's a great Bible story. But what really happened? Well, we actually know what really happened. What we see in front of us over here is called Taylor's Prism. It was found in what we call modern-day Iraq, more than a century ago. And Taylor's Prism tells the accounts of King Sennacherib of Assyria. And it says that this King Sennacherib comes to Jerusalem, and he besieges Jerusalem, and he captures King Hezekiah like a bird in a cage. Now, normally what the Assyrians would then do is take the bird, take the cage, and you never hear of either ever again. But it says that there was political instability back in ancient Nineveh. And what does Sennacherib do? He goes home. And he leaves Hezekiah in place. And he takes tribute. And so I say to this journalist, well, here's what the Bible says. Here's what the archaeology says. Are you a science denier? Right? Borrowing a page from some climate change, right? But here's what the archaeology is saying. And I said, do you know where Taylor's Prism is? He says, no, I don't. I said, it is, we have a few British people here I saw yesterday. It is in the British Museum in London. And I said, are our good friends like Jeremy Corbyn helping to prove the Jewish biblical connection to Jerusalem? Probably not. And so I said to this journalist, forget the Israeli archaeologists. You can't trust them. Forget them. I said, you cannot go to a single serious museum anywhere in the world without finding antiquities that affirm the connection of the Jewish people, of Christians to Jerusalem. Not simply as a matter of faith, but as a matter of fact. Now, the icing on the cake of this story happened 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Dr. Eilat Mazar, a world-renowned archaeologist, she announces the discovery of a small seal, about the size of your thumbnail. Here's what it looks like. And this seal has a name on it. It's about 2,700 years old. It's a name that you've all heard before. The name on this seal is Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah. The biblical King Hezekiah, direct descendant of King David. His personal seal impression found just a few feet away from the Temple Mount, adjacent to the city of David. So you have the Siloam inscription about the tunnel engineered by the biblical King Hezekiah. You have Taylor's Prism telling the story of the Assyrian siege on Jerusalem, which mentions King Hezekiah. And now we have King Hezekiah's seal impression. So, again, for many people, if it says it here, it's enough. But I can tell you, as a man of faith, it's still pretty cool to see the archaeology also. So, in case the Bible isn't a good enough source, and in case the archaeology isn't a good enough source, so I'll share one other source with you. Here we have 1930, a brief guide to the Al-Haram al-Sharif, referring to the Temple Mount, put out by the Supreme Muslim Council. Why is the Supreme Muslim Council putting out a guide booklet about the Temple Mount in English in 1930? Who's in the country? The British. What does the Supreme Muslim Council want the British to know in 1930 about the Temple Mount? It might surprise you. It says here in the highlighted portion, its identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. Wow. This too is the spot, according to the universal belief, on which David built an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. They're quoting 2 Samuel. So what do we have here? There was a temple. There was a David. There was a Solomon. Beyond dispute, universal belief, and they quote scriptures. Things have changed a little bit. But we're going to keep discovering. And so let me show you something very, very significant. The very southern end of the city of David. 2004, there is a road. Beneath the road, there's a sewage pipe. And we have another a famous saying, which is, God has many messengers. In the case of 2004, what happens, the messenger was a sewage pipe. The sewage pipe explodes. And now you have a big mess. And in Jerusalem, the holy basin, city of David, you don't just send in construction crews, you also have to send in archaeologists. The archaeologists are there, they hear the bulldozer and the tractors scraping, scratching, it doesn't sound right. So they clear everybody out. And it turns out that they had discovered these ancient stone steps. 2,000 years old. The archaeologist said, we know what these steps are. These steps lead down to a place that everyone in this room has heard about. The ancient pool of Siloam. Mentioned in the Christian scriptures, the Hebrew Bible, is a place of deep significance. The Bible tells us that 3 times a year, all of Israel would have to go up to the temple on pilgrimage. We're talking about Passover, Pentecost, Tabernacles. And what do you have to do before you can go up to the temple? You have to wash. The historian Josephus said that 2,000 years ago, up to 1 million people would have gone on pilgrimage. It's a lot of people who needed to wash. Go early. And so they said, if this is the pool of Siloam down at the bottom of the picture over here, and we know where the temple stood on the Temple Mount, how did all the pilgrims get from the temple, from the pool of Siloam up to the Temple Mount? They widened the excavation, and what did they find? What they found is something that is being literally excavated as we speak, as we like to say in Israel, 24/6. Right? What they found is this. This is the ancient pilgrimage road. This is the road that our ancestors walked on 2,000 years ago when they went from the pool of Siloam all the way up to the footsteps of the western wall of the Temple Mount. Not a road like this, not stones that look like these. This road, these stones. And I'll tell you something that I think is meaningful to everyone in this room. There was a very famous Jewish person 2,000 years ago who was hanging out in Jerusalem. Now, there was a senator I met with a couple of months ago, and he says to me, what are the chances that Jesus walked on this road? So I said, listen, Senator, I don't want to tell you stories. Let me give you a conservative estimate. I said, conservatively speaking, the likelihood that Jesus walked on this road is 100%. It's conservative. He was Jewish 2,000 years ago. He would have gone from the pool of Siloam up along the pilgrimage road, like all the other Jews at that time, up to the temple on the Temple Mount and along the pilgrimage road. One thing that if you haven't gotten to spend time with Jews, the more you do, the more you'll see, is Jews like to talk. And we find along the pilgrimage road, the only one of its kind found in Jerusalem so far, an ancient podium. And imagine 2,000 years ago, somebody who had a religious message, a political message, an ethical teaching that they wanted to share with the masses. They would have done it where all the people were, and that was along the pilgrimage road. And this is being excavated as we speak. And in the next few years, once it is completed, where will you come out when you walk up from the pool of Siloam? You will come out over here at the very footsteps of the Western Wall and Temple Mount. Now, to wrap up, in a few days I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., meeting with congressmen and senators, other administration officials. And when I speak to them about Jerusalem, I say, listen, this is not simply a Jewish issue. This is not simply an Israel issue. The fate of Jerusalem is an America issue. The founding fathers of this great country understood what everyone in this room knows and what all 5.4 million members of CUFI know, which is the foundations of this great country, the Judeo-Christian heritage that this country is built upon has its roots in Jerusalem. Now, what's at stake? Many of you have been to Jerusalem before. There's this Christian saying that I like, is you're God's hands and feet. But you're not only God's hands and feet, you're also your community's hands and feet. Because most of them likely have never been to Jerusalem. Encourage them to go. Because when you're in Jerusalem, seeing is believing. And for those who can't go, share with them what you have seen. One other thing that's happened is that so far 7 states have affirmed resolutions condemning the United Nations for these anti-Jerusalem resolutions, affirming the Jewish and Christian ties to Jerusalem based upon the archaeological discoveries in the city of David, 7 states, and counting. So now let's come back to the boxes. Along the pilgrimage road, archaeologists find this: a small bronze coin melted along the flagstones, melted in the fires that destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70. On this coin, which I have here 2,000 years old, on this coin, it has the words, "For the freedom of Zion." Zion being another name for Jerusalem. Now, why were the Jews minting the coins at this time when they knew Jerusalem was going to be destroyed? And an answer that I heard, which I find to be meaningful, is that the Jews of Jerusalem at that time understood that while Jerusalem might be destroyed by the Romans, they also believed and hoped and prayed that one day their descendants would find these coins and know what their ancestors lived and died for a free Jerusalem. Now, they probably thought it would take, like the Babylonian exile, a few decades. They couldn't imagine it would be nearly 2,000 years. But in 1958, 10 years after Israel's reestablishment, Israel mints its first national medallion. But there's something strange about this medallion, because if you look closely, on one side of the medallion, they have reminted a Roman victory coin, which shows a Roman legionnaire towering above a Jewish woman on her knees crying, and it says on it, Judea Capta. Jews come from Judea. This was the coin that the Romans minted to celebrate Israel's destruction. On the other side of the coin, though, the first medallion minted by Israel, it says, Israel Liberata. Israel has been liberated. The Jewish woman is now standing tall, proudly holding in her arms a newborn child. Beside her is a man working the land, making the desert bloom. This was Israel's response to Rome, 2,000 years in the making. Now, if you want to see the great Roman Empire, I could recommend some museums. You want to see Jerusalem, the Jewish people, Christians, alive. Come to Jerusalem. Two last discoveries very quickly, and then we'll do a science project. Along the pilgrimage road, we find this small white marble. It's called a Becca. It says in the Bible, the book of Exodus, a Becca for a head. What does that mean, a Becca for a head? It's not short for Rebecca. A Becca for a head, that's for the counting the census, right? So now what happens, once a year, everyone in Israel has to bring something up to the temple to be counted. What is that thing? Anyone know? It is this, a silver half shekel. Now, how does the priest, when you go up to the temple and he says, silver half shekel, please, how does he know if you're really giving him a kosher silver half shekel? The Becca was a counterweight. What I'm holding here is a silver half shekel coin found along the pilgrimage road. This was carried by some pilgrim going up to the temple in Jerusalem, dropped out of his pocket, found 2,000 years later. It says on it the words in ancient Hebrew script, Holy Jerusalem. Jerusalem is holy. And it's still here, and we're holding this coin. It belonged to someone connected to all of us. Right? One of our ancestors from 2,000 years ago was holding this coin. Again, it's not simply a matter of faith. It's a matter of fact. Now, but let's end off with this experiment over here. The red represents Jerusalem. The blue represents the connection of the people in this room, Jews and Christians alike, to Jerusalem. Now, I've given up trying to help my children with their math and science homework a long time ago. I'm not very good at chemistry, but here's one thing I could tell you. If someone said to you right now, well, I just want the blue, I just want the red, it's not going to happen. If someone comes and says, I'm going to try and separate the connection of the Jewish people, of Christians, of the people in this room with Jerusalem, it's not happening. And that, too, is not simply a matter of faith. It's a matter of fact. Thank you very much.